Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Outer North East Community Committee. My name's Councillor Norma Harrington, and I'll be chairing today's meeting. The Outer North East Community Committee covers all Woodley, Harewood and Wetherby wards, and is a committee where ward councillors have an opportunity to discuss and make decisions about services and priorities for the local area, and also consider funding applications for local community projects and youth activities. I'll now invite members of the community committee to introduce themselves, but I'll start with the officers going from my left.
Evening, everyone. Carl Inchliff from the communities team.
Good evening, everybody. Councillor Alan Lamb, one of the Wetherby ward councillors.
Councillor Matthew Robinson, one of the councillors for the Harewood ward.
Penny Stables from the Wetherby ward. Did you hear me on that one?
Councillor Neil Buckley, or Woodley ward. Councillor Sam Firth for the Harewood ward.
Now ask officers to introduce themselves, please.
Thank you, Chair. Jason Tooting, head of 100% Digital Leeds.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gareth Self. I'm the manager of the Gypsy Traveller Service.
I'm Sergeant Sam Standen, the Sergeant for Harewood and Wetherby wards.
Good evening, Inspector Richard Armstead. I am the North East Leeds Neighbourhood Inspector.
Elaine Matson, Localities Officer.
Good evening, Toby Russell, Clerk to the committee.
Thank you. Toby, can you run through the agenda items 1 to 5, please?
Thank you, Chair. Under agenda item number 1, there are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under item number 2, there are no items which would require the exclusion of the press or the public. Under item number 3, there is one formal late item, which is policing priorities in the Outer North East, and this was circulated to members prior to the meeting and is down as agenda item 12A. Under agenda item number 4, apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Stevenson, and I believe we're just waiting on the arrival of Councillor Cohen. And under agenda item number 5, can I ask members to declare any interests?
Thanks, Chair. Declare an interest in item 900% Digital Leeds update. I don't think it's a pecuniary or prejudicial interest, but still it's in line with that I work for Tech UK.
Item number 6 is the open forum. A period of 10 minutes may be allocated to each ordinary member, but we don't appear to have any members of the public. We haven't got any paper representation, have we, Toby? Okay. So we're moving on to item number 7, which is minutes of the previous meeting held on the 18th of September. Could these minutes be accepted as a correct record, please? Nods. Everybody all right? Okay, thank you very much. And then item number 8 is matters arising from the minutes. Do members wish to raise any matters arising? No. Take that as a no. Okay, thank you very much. And I would like now to suggest that we move item number 12A, which is the police item, to the top of the agenda so that these gentlemen can be released for other duties. Is everybody's quite happy with that? Yeah, okay, thank you. So over to you, gentlemen, just a brief summary of the report that you've sent.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everybody. Just to sort of introduce myself again, I am Richard Armstead. Some of you know me, some of you have met me. I appreciate some people haven't. I've been the Neighbourhoods Inspector for North East since the retirement of Richard Horn in June just gone. So I've had a very happy, if not challenging, 6 months in role. And so just in relation to the policing priorities, which are the ones that are generally set by both the police, the public and the partners at the policing communities together meetings that we hold. These can be taken rather generically for all of the outer northeast wards to be to do our utmost to prevent and detect burglary dwelling specifically. And also to address the community concerns around the antisocial use of motor vehicles in and around our roads surrounding the villages and through the larger wards. So in terms of the report that was prepared, this was just taken against the published policing priorities. So just to run through them, antisocial behaviour in Woodley. Obviously, the Moralton Centre is referenced there with off-roads and quads and cars. That's not actually been too much of an emerging issue for us of late, but the wider King Lane issue in terms of antisocial behaviour use, specific to almost where the park and ride is, that has been something that we've worked really quite hard on. And whilst he's not here, Sergeant Pervin, who is one of Sergeant Standon's colleagues on the neighbourhoods team, who has the ward responsibility for Woodley and Moortown, has done a good piece of partnership engagement work there with the council, firstly to try and secure some additional CCTV, which whilst was unsuccessful, it did prompt that wider conversation around, well, what else could we do? And there's been almost like a three-stage process in line with how we dealt with the COVID protocols over last year, which is engagement, education, and then enforcement, which in essence means that vehicles that we can identify as causing antisocial behaviour on King Lane and in and around that area, through the index of the vehicle and tracking the registered keeper down, they are firstly sent a letter advising them of the behaviour within their vehicle has come to the attention of the police following public complaint. Those details are all kept recorded. There's been upwards of about 12 or 15 of those letters sent out off the top of my head. And obviously following on from that, if that pattern continues, then we would look to explore the powers under either the antisocial behaviour legislation or the PSPO legislation within Leeds. The larger and somewhat more impactful, I would argue, priority is residential burglary. And as I've had this conversation with other councillors from the North East today, I will tell you exactly the same, that is my personal concern for the North East neighbourhoods. There has been an increase in the amount of residential burglaries, certainly over this last few months. Woodley and whilst the councillors for this ward out here, Woodley and Rounday, are the two ward areas within the North East which unfortunately suffer the most residential burglaries. And in terms of police work against that, there's the preventative strand, which we and the 999 patrol teams will take, which is part of the Darker Nights initiatives that we do run, where there'll be enhanced staffing, working additional hours in areas of where we believe that there's areas of concern in and around the Woodley area. That's supported through an intelligence process aiming to look at any and all forensic opportunities that exist within the reported crimes, working across districts, working across forces, trying to establish if we've got a travelling criminality, either coming from Bradford or from North Yorkshire who are coming down, or even a wee bit more local coming up from South or East Leeds and into our area, committing those offences. So that is ongoing work. And just if I just move through onto the second page, just again, touching on Sergeant Sandon, Sam to my right here, has been running and holding very specific traffic operations aimed at targeting excess speed in and around Harewood, Wetherby, Boston Spa, all the outer areas. Dropping down closer to the centre into Woodley, then the team that are based out of Steinbeck have been essentially doing the same operation, vehicle check operations, dealing with uninsured vehicles, ticketing people for no seatbelt offences, mobile phone offences, essentially just trying to raise the profile of the police in and around the policing of the roads, which has and always will be a very serious priority for West Yorkshire Police, and supported obviously by the fact that the Vision Zero campaign of the current Mayor's office, who are well behind that, and it's a well publicised social media community contact. So those, in essence, are the two main priorities that I would say exist across the outer North East. Wetherby and Harewood, whilst they obviously do suffer from burglary dwellings or residential burglaries, they do see that to a lesser extent, Harewood specifically. Though unfortunately Harewood this month has actually, I think, has had maybe 3 or 4 burglary dwellings reported to the police. That is quite unusual. And Harewood does in fact have the lowest crime, reported crime, of all of the northeast MPT areas. The staffing, as you will see at the very head of the page, is all proportionate in terms of the crime demand that comes in. Rough figures, the outer northeast will probably provide maybe 30% of the priority crime demand for Leeds district, and the staffing that we have allocated to that is proportionate to that, with 30% of the available staffing that I have. Should you all wish to collectively request that I be given additional staff, then I would certainly not push back against that, and I don't think Sam would either. Is there anything you'd like to add in terms of the traffic side of things?
No, as I said, we are. Sorry, that's my fault. Yeah, I am trying to push for as many of these operations as possible and just ensure that the funding's available. I'm going to do another one just before Christmas, which I've no doubt will probably hit drink drivers as well in the area. But in relation to the burglary dwellings, obviously Harewood has been hit recently with a number of the quad bike burglaries, which some are classed as non-residential because they're obviously hitting the barns and taking them out of there. But some obviously do hit the residentials. We are struggling in relation to what we can do about it, and we're obviously considering all options. At the moment, one of my just last week, one of my PCs, Andy Kukowski, who's very well known in the area, has tried to do quite a lot of cross-border communication. We've now actually got a Teams group which is working incredibly effectively. To be honest, we would have the options available were a WhatsApp one, but West Yorkshire couldn't get on that. But the Teams one does seem to be working quite well. And in relation to anything that's stolen, any incident that happens, the officers from North Yorkshire and from the outerlying east areas are all posting stuff on it so that we're all aware of it, and we can all obviously follow it as soon as it happens, rather than wait for the updates the following morning. So no, not really much on yours, sir.
Yeah, thank you. That was just that's me not brushing over what we would class as commercial burglary, or burglary other in police speak, anything that isn't your house essentially. And I did mean to mention that I do know that the team at Wetherby have been doing an awful lot of work and working with the intelligence side of business to try and identify people who are committing these offences, and we're certainly looking at either reinvigorating or restarting or rekindling, whichever word you want to choose, like a farm watch approach to the outer northeast. And just on that topic, obviously some of you will or will not be aware that we have been without a support staff officer across Northeast MPT, the neighbourhood support officer. That is the person, Simon Brooksbank was the previous holder of the role. Simon's moved on to different things, and it's taken a little bit of time to establish who the right person to be his replacement will be. But as I mentioned to one or two people informally the other day, we have been successful in that. I have been able to offer that position to a new member of staff who I am now seeking to get released from their current role. They are a West Yorkshire Police employee, so I'm hoping that won't take too long. But I would say new year, new start, and hopefully by January mid, the new person will be in post, and then those lines of communication will improve between us as your neighbourhood representatives and yourselves as the local elected representatives, because I'm incredibly mindful that the communication side has not been as good as I would have liked since taking the post. So thank you for your patience in that regard, but that will be improving. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. That's great. So are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of points. When you mention burglaries, are all burglaries now followed up with a visit and an investigation of some type? That's the first thing. And secondly, you mentioned in your presentation that whether the burglars are from Bradford or South Leeds, what is it that is about Bradford that makes them come and rob from us? And then thirdly, and the final one really is, we used to have with Inspector Horn regular, say, once a quarter meetings at Steinbeck, where the three of us would go and just have a chat about things and so forth. Is that something which we could reinstate?
That'll teach me for forgetting to bring a pen, but I'll test my memory skills. I'll take that in running order. So yes, I know it was a national thing. Oh, thank you. And around the National Police Chiefs Council saying and police will attend every burglary dwelling. That has been something, and unless Sam tells you that has been something that we have traditionally always done in West Yorkshire. So what would happen in terms of if your, heaven forbid, your house was broken into, you would obviously then report that to the police. An officer would come out and see you. You would have a follow-up visit from a forensic assessment, a scenes of crime officer. And then also something that we do is the community support officers. Every day when they come on to work, they'll identify which burglaries have happened in the areas that they cover. And then they will go and pay what we would call a reassurance visit to the person reporting if that was something that had been requested. That's obviously very useful when you might find it's more of an elderly person who's been a victim of a crime. But yeah, certainly all burglary dwellings should be getting a visit from an officer. Generally speaking, they will all be classified as for police attendance within the hour. Unless obviously it's ongoing, then it would come through as an emergency. That hour response time may be tinkered with, let's just say if someone's been on holiday or they've come back and the burglaries happen over time. But not all burglary dwellings do get responded to. I'll go to point 3 because I can't remember what point 2 was. You'll have to remember. Certainly, those get-togethers can be reinstated at any time. That's probably my fault really for not making that contact in the first place. But absolutely more than happy to come. I come out to Wetherby frequently, so either at Wetherby or down at Steinbeck, it's as easy for me. And just remember what your second question was. Why do people from Bradford come to commit crime in Leeds? I will tactfully say that is a socio-economic question that I will take the 5th on.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Robinson, then Councillor Lamb.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. Firstly, a big thank you to Inspector and to the Sergeant for coming this evening as well. And 6 months sort of have passed, and I think we're now in a really good place to enter 2024 with restarting of the pacts, with a new relationship and better communication that's going on, not just between ourselves, but actually across the whole of the community as well. And I think that's down to the both of you. So it's a thank you from me to begin. And also a thank you to Simon as well, who was absolutely excellent in the work that we did with him for many, many years. On the police plans for 2024, there's the formalisation of Shop Watch, which is great, and the formalisation of Farm Watch, which I'll come back to in a minute. There used to be Pub Watch that was there, and I'm acutely aware that I have a publican next to me as well. But is that something that's still going? Is that something that's sort of fallen by the wayside, or something that we want to bring back?
Yes, Pub Watch occurs on the first Tuesday of every month still, and will continue to. It's not just one of my PCs that goes to it, it's the PCs from across all the teams that attend. That still occurs. In relation to Shop Watch, I've got a new PCSO who is probably the keenest PCSO on the planet. And he covers obviously both wards. Generally speaking, Shop Watch affects more Wetherby of the groups, obviously, because it's got more shops there. We don't tend to have that much of a shoplifting problem in Harewood, mostly because there's substantially fewer shops. But no, he's very, very on Shop Watch. He's identified all the different groups that do it, and we try to monitor as best as possible.
Councillor Lamb?
Sorry, Chair. I was just
Oh,
gonna-
sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to follow up if that's okay
Okay.
on that. Sorry, apologies. And then I will promise I will let others get the roar in. On the farm, which I think that's brilliant to hear, by the way, on Shop Watch and Pub Watch. And I think Pub Watch has been really successful in the past. So actually, I think probably in this idea of capturing communication, it'd be really good to have a conversation with you a little bit like they're doing in Old Woodley, regular catch-ups where we can get them in and understand what the priorities for the pubs are, what their concerns are as we go through. On Farm Watch, you quite rightly mentioned some of the commercial theft that had gone on, particularly stretching across North Yorkshire and into the West Yorkshire border, looking around Harewood, the estate and that sort of area. But actually, it's not just restricted to that. It stretches across the entirety of our ward just because of that the nature of it that's there. In the past, we've talked about funding through the community committee, some additional ANPR cameras to go out in the area. And we've sort of stalled, I think, a little bit on that. We've talked about actually using some of the latest technology that allows some of the more heat sensitive camera equipment to be used by the police that can be kept in the Harewood Weatherby wards as well, and looked at how we can use that. Even stamping equipment I think North Yorkshire have a facility for it, but West Yorkshire don't, where farm vehicles or commercial vehicles can be stamped with identification plates so they can't be quickly sold on if stolen. Are you amenable, if we can, to take those forward with you through Elaine and the community committee? Because I'm mindful that I want to give you the gear that you need to do the job, but we've put funding in place in the past to be able to do that.
In a simple answer, then yes. Anything that we can use to aid and assist in the prevention and detection of crime, I am 100% in favour of. I know that there's always some small print somewhere that makes life difficult. That is the nature of everything. I think specific to ANPR, it's quite tightly governed through probably like the information sharing process. And I think, if from memory, I think when we met, before I even officially took this role on, that was a conversation that you were having with my predecessor. So absolutely, I'm more than happy to take those proposals forward through and at least get the central answer on as to why it's just not something that we can use. But if there is the opportunity to do it, then I am 100% happy to work with people to get that in.
And I said I wouldn't keep coming back in. If I may, can we get that as something that's an action that's down in the minutes so that we can be really clear on that and get a meeting in place as quickly as possible to try and expedite that funding getting out the door to the police so they can use it as quickly as possible as well. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Lamb and then Councillor Stables.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. My question is, who do we write to request that you get some extra staff? And if colleagues are agreeable, could we write as a committee to do that?
Now, ordinarily, I would say keep my name out of it, but I think it's too late for that this evening, isn't it? Yeah, the simplest answer to that question is Chief Superintendent Dodds, who's the district commander for Leeds. He obviously controls the whole budget piece and resource allocation for the district. It sits under separate portfolios. But he would certainly delegate that out for review to either a superintendent or a chief inspector. If it ever finds its way all the way down to me, I will obviously approve it. But no, on a serious note, Mr. Dodds is the person to put that to.
Councillor Stables.
Thank you, Chair. Getting back to Shop Watch, I'm aware that we've got Shop Watch for Weatherby, so I've got kind of a couple of questions. One, does it cover Boston Spa? Because we haven't discussed that actually. And also, what's the procedure in terms of if a shop experiences a theft, shoplifting incident, what is the procedure? Just so I'm clear. I don't mean in terms of reporting it, what would actually happen from a policing perspective? Would you talking about for burglaries, is actually
Sure.
what happened? So,
I can answer the shop theft question. I don't know, but I don't know whether Shop Watch does cover Boston Spa.
Yes, Shopwatch does. It's generally the same groups of people who are doing both. And obviously when one place gets a bit hot, they would go to the other, and vice versa. But yeah, there are actually teams of them doing it. I don't want to scare shops or anything like that, but it's teams of people who are actually committing these offences. And there's probably about 2 or 3 who are doing it. But yes, it does cover both.
And in terms of what would happen if, as and when the shop reports a theft, it's contextual. It's circumstances dependent. If it's happened there now, then there might be the argument for sending somebody straight away. If persons were detained, somebody could be sent straight away. But I think the reality of it is that it would be what we would call thrived, which is the risk-based decision model that West Yorkshire Police use: threat, harm, risk, vulnerability, and whether they would see the vulnerability in a shop theft is call dependent. All I would say is that we are running, I mean, the city centre particularly does, I mean, you might think obviously, but it does see quite a high amount of retail theft. And there's ongoing operations for that. We're fed information through about like repeat locations within the northeast, and potentially people who are committing those offences, people who are wanted for those offences. And yeah, there are organised teams of people going around shoplifting, but I would hazard a guess from the information I've seen for the northeast, it tends to be more of what you might consider opportunistic. Stealing from the co-op, stealing from a Sainsbury's, any young person who sort of shoplifting sweets on the way to school, if that's still a thing, they're not obviously going to get the full weight of the law thrown on them. It's all circumstances dependent. But all I would say is that I would encourage it is reported, because as I often say, if it's not highlighted as an issue, then it will never get any attention. And so there's a whole host of ways people can report it, whether they wish to do it over the phone or whether they wish to do it online, or I would say that those are probably the 2 better ways to do it, rather than just maybe telling the local officer who calls in that it happened. It just helps capture it on a wider demand management scale. If we know that if there's a certain place in Boston Spa that potentially has 6 shopliftings a week and doesn't actually tell us, then I would encourage those shop owners to do that.
It's just a particular thing, but I'll pick it up with Sergeant Standen, actually, a particular incident. But I just wondered just for my information, sort of what the normal procedure was, but I'll pick up a particular thing afterwards. Thank you.
I mean, sorry, just to it'd be if I worked in the police control room and you phoned me up to say your shop had been broken into, I would essentially record a basic crime of a shop theft, and that would then be passed out for allocation to an officer who, generally speaking, would be within our volume crime world. If there was anything more around that, it might come to an officer to actually come and attend, but it would be recorded at first point of receipt by the police, and then we would deal with it on an evidential basis.
What I would say in addition to that is, in terms of the number of calls that occur, Harewood and Wetherby probably have generally the least number of all the 6 northeast wards, and my PCs and PCSOs will come on every day and will do a search on not just the crimes on the crime recording system, but on the incident logs as well. So anything that is actually phoned in, they will discuss them normally on probably their first half an hour, 3/4 an hour. So they'll all know where these incidents are happening, and if one is being particularly targeted, they'll know about it. They're all officers other than Gareth, who's the shop watch expert. They're all officers who've been there 5-6 years plus, so they all know that area really well, and they all know the people who are doing it.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. And most of the questions I was going to ask have already been asked. So I was going to ask very basically, you say in the report that Wetherby and Harewood account for 20% of all recorded crime, but Harewood is the lowest. Do you know exactly how that actually breaks down in terms of percentage wise?
I can get that. I don't know it off the top of my head. But but I've got all the actual sort of breakdown of each individual offence that we would class as sort of like a theft from motor vehicle, theft of motor vehicle, robbery, burglaries. I'll get that to you.
Thank you very much. The second thing I was going to ask is in relation to we've had a lot of issues with motorbikes and quad bikes, but they are on the border between the outer east and the outer northeast, and as a result, maybe not be recorded as readily within the Harewood ward as potentially in Crossgates and Winmore ward or Garforth, for example. I just wondered in terms of how that's recorded to make sure that we actually are able to get those sorts of responses in the future, because ultimately something may originate next door, but then proliferate and expand as it gets into the rural area that we love and enjoy.
Again, in its simplest form, when the person phones in to report that, the location they give will be identified with what we'd call a beat code. And obviously we've got lots of areas that kind of crisscross, and the police arguments about, well, you have that side of the street, we have the other side of the street, historically they went on and they do still go on. But that's how it would be identified. In terms of I won't lie to you, it's not something that I actually have looked at myself in terms of that neighbouring ward and the crossover to see if there has been any things that I've maybe missed in my review of the northeast. But going back to when I get my neighbourhood support officer in place, this is part of the work that they will be doing, crime profile analysis for the whole of my sort of MPT area. So that will be picked up by that person, if that answers your question to some extent.
So, thank you. Councillor Cohen, was there anything that you would want to ask the police? I know you've just arrived, but I just didn't want to leave you out.
Thank you, Chair. No, I'm always able to address things to our local inspector as and when they arrive. Thank you.
Which is a timely reminder for me to say, I have only just seen that email that you sent me. You have been very diplomatic there. I will address that, Mr. Cohen, and let you know. Councillor Cohen, I'll let you know.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. I do appreciate your time and actually putting the report together in time for the late item and for you coming this evening and answering all the questions. So feel free to leave. Okay, thank you. So moving on to the next item on the agenda is 100% digital Leeds update, and that's Jason. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I give a brief summary of the report, then very happy to take questions, have any conversations that members may wish. So I thought within the report, I would try and keep it brief. I'm not sure if I've succeeded entirely in that, but paragraphs 2 to 5 essentially set out how the 100% Digital Leeds team works. So the team is part of the integrated digital service within Leeds City Council, and the team work with partners across the city. So they don't work directly with the people who are digitally excluded. They work with the teams and services and settings and organisations who are already working with those people in another context. They might be offering personal care, they might be offering homeless shelter support, they might be working in a care home, and so on and so on. So the vision for the 100% Digital Leeds team is summarised at the first bullet point in paragraph 4, which is that everyone in Leeds has equal opportunity to use digital tools, technology and services in the right way for them. And the last bit of that statement is probably the most important for the team, which is that the team are not prescriptive in terms of how people should be using digital and what they should be using it for. From our perspective, it's very much about personal choice, about opportunity, and that the outcomes that people want for themselves, for their friends, for their families, for their communities are enabled through the use of digital and digital inclusion. So it's a means to an end from our perspective, but we're not the team that sets what those end goals are. That should come from the people and the communities and the organisations that are working with them. So that's how we work. Paragraph 6 onwards gives some examples of the kind of work that the team are doing. And again, trying to be brief, so picked just one example to go into in more detail, but the bullet points at paragraph 6, more information on all of those initiatives, is available on the 100% Digital Leeds website that's linked from within the report. But I focused on one example, which is around digital inclusion for transport. That's a project that the team have been working on for around 9 months now, funded by central government funding, and it's around increasing people's use of digital tools and technologies to give them more confidence and expand their options in terms of the kinds of transport that they use to get around the city or to move more widely beyond the city. That includes things like taxi apps. It includes things like the First Bus app, so that you've got a better idea of when the bus is coming, so you're not having to stand in the rain. You can leave the house hopefully at a time when you know the bus is only 5 minutes away, and so on and so forth. The reason that I picked that project to focus on in a little more detail is because that uses a model that the team try and use across all of the work they do, which is looking across sectoral approach and across community approach. So looking at an issue, either geographically or from an outcomes focused, like transport, or from a community of interest focus, something that might affect predominantly older people or people with long-term health conditions or so on. And because we work with partners who deliver the services to the people, we don't do that ourselves. Again, what we try and do is use a range of partners who've got expertise, understanding, and reach essentially across communities. So some of the partners have a very local focus. Holbeck Together would be an example. Morley Digital would be another. Crossgates and District Good Neighbours. So the 3 bullet points at paragraph 10, they are very local organisations who work in a place with any of the community who live in that place. The bottom 3 bullet points onto the next page are partner organisations who have a more citywide remit. So if you are an older person living anywhere in Leeds, Age UK Leeds are able to support you. And that, same with Your Backyard and Leeds Irish Health and Homes. If you're from a particular demographic community, some of the partners that we work with means that they're not limited by geography. They can work with any of, in inverted commas, those kinds of people, whether you're older, whether you're an unpaid carer, whether you have learning disabilities, and so on and so on. We've got partners who have both the local geographical in-depth knowledge, but also the knowledge of particular kinds of people, but a citywide remit. And that approach is something that we try and use across all of the bigger projects that we work with. From paragraph 12, I tried to give an overview of the sort of breadth and the depth of the work that the team do. So a lot of the time that the team spend is on building the capacity of those organizations that we work with, because those organizations are usually not digital or digital inclusion organizations themselves. So they may see digital exclusion as an issue for the people that they serve and support and work with. They might not have the expertise and the understanding as to how they should tackle it. So my team will work with that organization to define what their role might be in helping the people they're already working with to become more digitally included. And that might be, as some of the indicators, the figures there show, it might be bringing funding into that organization, helping them to identify funding and helping them to apply for, get that funding and spend it wisely. It might be delivering training to the staff and volunteers in the organization so they have a better understanding of what digital inclusion looks like in a particular context for a particular community, and then the sort of interventions that we might co-design to help those people. And then at paragraph 14, we ran a sample survey to get a sense of the breadth of support and the scale of support that those organisations that we work with are offering to communities across Leeds. So we surveyed just 10% of the organisations. We worked with, I think it was 220 partner organisations last year. We talked to about 20 of them, and the figures that they came back with are outlined there. 7,000 people helped by just 10% of the organisations that we work with across the city. Obviously, timesing that by 10, you're into the tens of thousands of people. And those people are supported in very different ways, depending on their context and their personal aims, objectives, goals. So as an example, if through our partner organizations, we're working with a care home who are supporting people approaching end of life, I'm not interested in an essential skills framework and taking that care home resident through the 6 essential skills that they need to, no. They need to do one thing, and that might be to get virtual visits from their friends and family who can't access the home in person because it's on COVID lockdown. If that's the one thing they need to do, that's what we'll focus on. And that applies across. If you're street homeless in Leeds City Centre, your priority might be, how do I get on the housing ladder? How do I manage my housing claim? How do I make sure my benefits, and so on and so on and so forth. So different people in different contexts will have those different personal goals. And our view is the people who know that best are the people that work most closely with those people. That's why we work in the way that we do. I am conscious also that the request to attend the committee today came with, could you address skills and connectivity, or could you give an overview of that? Because they are absolutely two of the barriers that prevent people from being digitally included. If you don't have the skills to use the equipment, if you have no connectivity, so that you can't get online. I spoke to colleagues who lead on connectivity within Leeds City Council, a very, very broad overview covered in Appendix 1, just some figures and some sort of snapshot diagram maps. Very happy to go away if we'll see where the questions go, but if members have more detailed questions about connectivity from specific providers and so on and so forth, very happy to go away and collect more information. There is a connectivity board within Leeds City Council that is chaired by a colleague within City Development. Almost all of the providers present to that board on a very regular basis, but a lot of the information that they present is commercially sensitive. So I wasn't able to include it in the reports, but if members would like more information, my colleague is very happy to provide that, and I'm happy to be the conduit for that. And then the final page is the alphabetical list of all of the organisations that the 100% Digital Leeds team have worked with over the last 12 months. Again, see where the conversation and the questions go, but if members look at the list and think there are organisations within my area that are not on here, I'd be very grateful to be connected to those organisations so that we can have those conversations and build up the work in that place with that partner organisation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Firth and then Councillor Stables have a question, and then Councillor Buck.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think that just on that simple point that you raised there, I wondered whether Weatherby in Support of the Elderly is a particular charity that you have any work with. I know that we do. It is on there, isn't it?
It's wise.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask, in terms of really the biggest issue we have in our areas, that we have the older demographic. I represent one of the oldest wards by life expectancy in the city. And I just wondered, when it comes to an area where there aren't regularly libraries or any other hub available that's actually within your ward, what can be done to enable people to be able to get to those places further out, be it Weatherby, Seacroft, Garforth or Woodley, you name it, where they'll be able to get to. Thank you.
Thank you. So 2 parts, I'll answer that. So Weatherby in Support of the Elderly, absolutely yes. My team co-chair a digital inclusion network for organisations across the city that support older people. We co-chair that with Leeds Elder People's Forum, and that is our longest running and best attended digital inclusion network. We have a number of them, and the one for older people is the most active, and WISE are absolutely part of that. I think the challenge that you highlight around what if there are no places, or if those places are very inaccessible, particularly for older people, we are starting to do more work, and I don't know how much I can say because it's not confirmed. We have some funding that we're looking to spend, essentially, to increase the amount of home visits that we can put in place. The funding, as with all funding, has some requirements around it and so on and so forth. But very happy to talk to you, as I say, because it's not confirmed. I'm being a little bit hesitant, but very happy to have a conversation outside the meeting or give you a heads up to the point at which it's confirmed. But it does primarily affect older people, but not only. We support organisations that work with people with physical disabilities, people with long-term health conditions, for whom even a bus ride is a challenge to get to the nearest venue that would offer the support. So we are absolutely actively looking at how we can increase the partner organisations that work with, who have the capacity and the workforce to be able to deliver those home visits, because that's absolutely at the moment not as big a part of our programme as the work that's going on within settings, within buildings, basically.
Very quickly, I was just going to say that when I mentioned summarising about having a largely older population, I think there also is a largely disconnected population when it comes to bus connections or otherwise. For example, Aberford, that has probably the largest amount of council homes of all of the villages in our ward, has no direct connection to the nearest hub at Garforth, for example. And therefore, as a result, really appreciate what you said. Thank you.
Thank you. We would also be very interested if there are any buildings or organisations within the ward, within the area, who perhaps are not on this list, who we may not have engaged with before. We're very happy to talk to almost any organisation, and it can be an organisation that currently has nothing to do with digital. It can be a church, it can be almost anywhere. But if they are seeing digital exclusion as a challenge, as a barrier for the people that they're already working with and getting into their building for all kinds of other services, my team will be very happy to talk to them about how we might be able to increase some provision, and what that looks like would be unique to that organisation. We wouldn't be going in with a prescriptive, you need to do this. We'd be going in with a conversation about what could we do from here. So very happy to be connected if you can think of any of those organisations.
Councillor Staples.
Thank you. Yeah, that's raised another query. So I've got two questions actually now. So the first, I'm really delighted to hear that you are looking at home visits, because one of the things that I'm really concerned about was exactly that point. So those that are older, those that are physically disabled, that can't access other centres, but also some of the most vulnerable in our society who lack the funds to have that connection. So they don't have a smartphone, they don't have a laptop, and if they then can't get out to the library, what then? Because they just feel completely disconnected with life as it is today. I think we're talking particularly a lot of the older people. So that's really good news. Obviously, that will be, I imagine, a fairly slow rollout. So I'm not, but nevertheless, it's good news to hear. My other query was looking at the graph in terms of connectivity, because this is the best case scenario, isn't it? This is if you are able to afford the highest speed technology, then of course, then it looks fabulous. But it would be interesting to know behind that, what percentage of people are connected to this highest level, and what actually is the average that people are experiencing, and what's the lowest people are experiencing, because that really doesn't give us a true indication of what it's like where we are.
Yes. So the first one is easier to answer. In terms of the home visits, part of what we're also looking to do is build an equipment lending offer into that as well, so that it may be that someone can visit and then show the person how to at least get set up with a device that they bring with them, and then leave it with them. And I'll see you in 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and so on and so on. You're absolutely right. If the person is struggling financially, it's very unlikely that they're going to go, okay, have it back, I've bought my own now, within that short time. But if there can at least be the start of a digital inclusion journey where that person might be able to see, if I was doing this, I wouldn't need to pay for that. If I can watch things on here, I might not need to pay for that subscription that I'm paying over here. If I can order my shopping, I might be able to save. And it's some of those conversations that we want to be having as we're having the visits. We already have partners, particularly within groundworks, for example, Green Doctors, who will go out and specifically focus on energy tariffs that you can, I know at the moment it's difficult to swap to a cheap one because there isn't often a cheap one available, but any kind of swap, even to be able to compare, you need to be online. And if you're not online, there's no chance that you're going to get onto a cheaper one. So we're absolutely building that in. In terms of the graph and in terms of some of the figures that you question, you're absolutely right. And that is, the answers to your questions are some of the information that I wasn't allowed to bring to because the providers are very cagey. So they will absolutely tell you how many properties they've connected and how many people can take advantage of that. If I have no money, I'm not taking advantage of it. It makes no difference how fast the fibre outside my house is if I can't afford to connect to it. I think you make a very good point. I don't have an answer for it other than to say I'm not even sure at the connectivity board that those providers will say how many subscribers they've got and what level those subscribers are paying for, whether it's a social tariff at the lowest possible or whether it's super high speed, all singing, all dancing. I'm not even sure they say in a global figure how many subscribers they've got because it's so commercially sensitive. They will talk very much more about how many properties, the geographical coverage, the potential number who could subscribe, but not necessarily how many have. But I'm very happy to go and ask that question of my colleague in the connectivity team and see if that information is available.
Sorry to take up more time. Are you also looking at, am I right in thinking that landlines will be disappearing at some time soon? And I'm also concerned about those that can't afford to have mobile phones and have relied, particularly older people who've relied on landlines for forever. What's going to happen for them, because they're suddenly going to feel incredibly isolated?
So the colleague that I've been mentioning, as if I'm dropping her into all kinds of things, I'm not. I'm very happy to speak to her. She and I have had more than one conversation with BT and the representatives. So you're absolutely right. 2025, landlines will be switched off unless anything changes, unless the government moves a deadline. That's currently what's being aimed at. And every landline will need to go through the internet, essentially, in broad terms. That brings with it a whole host of challenges for any household that does not currently have the internet. It's going to need a line putting in. We've been talking to BT about what that looks like. They've done some roadshows. We have also spoken to colleagues within the council who lead on telecare, because telecare services currently go through landlines and they will also move over. And that's a whole other conversation. You know, if you can't phone for a pizza, it's one thing. If you fall and your alarm doesn't work, that's an entirely different scale of issue. So there are a number of challenges. We have all kinds of resources from BT in terms of handouts and documents and walkthroughs as to what the process looks like. And they are proactively targeting, I think, vulnerable customers is the terminology that they use, but people who they know or presume are going to be more likely to not be able to make the move independently without some additional support. We're sharing that information with the digital inclusion networks that we have. So the organizations that support older people, people with learning disabilities, so on and so on. When last I spoke to the contact within the council's telecare service, this was maybe 6 months ago, she was saying that of all of the people that she had on her books, I think at the time she was saying there's like 200 left that haven't moved over. And she was confident that they would be before the deadline. Happy to go away and see if there's an update on that figure, but we're very conscious that that is absolutely a challenge. And we are working with BT and others to make sure that we mitigate that as far as possible with the partners that we work with. Yes.
Councillor Lynn Buckley.
Thank you. I'm just reading the report and seeing the number of organisations that are involved with the digital team. 10% doesn't seem a very high return, a high sample given of all the organisations involved. So do you feel then that because of this 10%, that the people surveyed, it's a true figure of the whole area? And also, how many in the survey that took part were from outer North East Leeds?
I'll openly admit I don't know the answer to that last question, but I can find out. We still have all of the organisations that did take part in the survey. We still have all of the information they sent us, so I can absolutely go back and find the answer to that question. In terms of the first bit, let me just make a note of that so that I don't forget. In terms of the first bit, part of the reason that we only sampled 10% was that in almost all cases, we're not paying the organisations that we work with to do the work. Sometimes we do get funding. As mentioned in the report, we bring in £1 million every year, and we have done for the last 3 years. But that is dispersed and spread across the organisations across the city, often for specific projects like the transport one that was featured in the report. The vast majority of the organisations that we work with and the vast majority of the work that they do is on a mutually beneficial partnership arrangement, basically. We help them to help their people to do what they and their people want to do. And it's purely that. It's to achieve the outcomes that we all want to see for the people who need them. That's a long-winded way of me saying, because we don't pay them, we're very conscious that we don't want to put too much of an additional burden on them when it comes to collecting data, reporting what they do, and so on and so forth. So we sampled a smaller number of partners that we would consider to be more long-standing. We've worked with them for a longer period. We have got them funding in the past. They have come to us for specific requests for things, and we've helped them. We didn't want to just go to the whole of our partnership network and say, could you all fill in this survey with all of these questions that we're not going to pay you to do, with information we might not have asked you to collect over the last 6 to 12 months. And it's an administrative burden for you when you're currently really stretched. And what's going to happen? It's going to go in a report that you might not read. It felt like too much of an ask. So we specifically chose the organizations that we targeted, but we did, in answer to the previous question, to your first question, we did try and do that representative sample. So as I was saying in the report, we tried to include local organizations with a citywide reach, organizations that were focusing support on older people from different communities of interest. So it was as representative as we could make it without going to the whole of the partners listed and saying, could you all do this, please? But I will absolutely get the figures for how many from Outer Northwest, if any. Send those figures back.
So I have Councillor Lamb, and then Councillor Neil Buckley, and then Councillor Robinson. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 2 quick points. One thing that organisation I noticed missing from the list, I think, are town and parish councils, which covers the entirety of our area in particular. They're responsible for a lot of community buildings. I'd just extend that in some cases, some of the community buildings are independently run. So Boston Spa is a good example where the Village Hall and the Deepdale Community Association run the community buildings there, but they're involved in lots of aspects of the community, and it would be a really good way to reach in to a lot of places. The second question then from me was, obviously this is entitled 100% digital leads. So what percentage are we now, and what's the plan to get to 100%?
So how long does the committee have? I have. So 100% digital leads. From our perspective, what that means is that 100% of people should have the opportunity to be digitally included and to use digital tools and technologies. For wider reasons, I don't want to quote the was he a constable? Thank you. I don't want to quite quote his answer from earlier in relation to the question around Bradford, but it's kind of similar. So digital exclusion is a result of socio-economic factors. It's because of your life situation. And if all of us around the table today feel like we're digitally included, good. Doesn't mean we're going to be digitally included in 5 years' time, because anything could happen in any of our lives. And we might develop a disability or a cognitive impairment or end up in a care home, or our relationships break down and we end up with addiction problems and we lose our home, and so on and so on and so forth. And that happens to people all the time, every single day. So even if today I could say to the committee, 100% of people are digitally included, thank you very much, they wouldn't be tomorrow or next week or next year. So that's why the way that we work is to build that digital inclusion safety net, so that as people's lives change and as they need that support, it's there for them from an organization that they trust and will be delivered in a way that is meaningful to them, which is a very long-winded way of me saying, I can't tell you. But the reason I can't tell you is because we do not measure it, because it's indefinable. So I could give you all of the equipment in the world, I could train you up, but you might think, well, what am I going to do with it? I don't know. And it goes in a drawer. Or I could motivate you and you're really keen and yes, I want to do it, but I can't afford the stuff. So where do I get it from? Well, don't know, can't help you. So then you're still excluded. And it's there are so many intangibles that cannot be measured that there is, from our perspective, no way of measuring it. What we do want is for 100% of people to have access to the support when and where they need it.
Well, obviously our job strategically is to be able to hold you accountable for what you're doing. So what are the indicators that tell us whether any of this is making a blind bit of difference?
That's a much fairer way of putting it, and I can answer that. So for us, the indicators are the things that we can control. So we can't control all of those wider socioeconomic factors that I talked about, way outside of the control of my team. But what we can control is that safety net. Are there more organizations now that are offering that digital inclusion support? Are those organizations offering that support for more people in more places to achieve a wider range of outcomes? Are those outcomes being achieved? Ultimately, the success or otherwise of digital inclusion is not measured in digital inclusion. It's measured in people managing their health more effectively, more people having access to more employment opportunities, more people feeling socially connected and being able to keep in touch with friends. It's measured in mental health and well-being, and so on and so on and so on. So our work supports all of the other strategic priorities that the council, that the city has, and that's how we measure the impact or otherwise of the work that we do. Yeah.
Councillor Neil Buckley and then Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder on page 14 at paragraph 9, it says the project was funded by the Department for Transport's Tackling Loneliness with Transport Fund. I just wondered, how big is that fund and what's Leeds' share of it?
I can tell you the second bit. I'm not sure, but so the city received £200,000. That went to Leeds Older People's Forum so often in almost all cases as a council and as a council team, we often can't apply for the funding because we're a statutory organised statutory service. So we work with charities who can often apply for funding. So it was Leeds Older People's Forum as the lead applicant for that bid. We received £200,000 for that project. Some of that funding then was given to those delivery partners. So they received some money to do the work essentially and deliver the project. But what Leeds' share was of that entire fund, I'm not sure what the whole fund was. We bid for, as far as I can remember, the maximum that was allowed. We were one of the top awards. So the fund was awarded to organisations across the country. And my memory is that we were pretty much, if not the top, one of the top 2 or 3 in terms of how much was awarded. But I'm very happy to go back and confirm and check the figures.
And just sort of asking the similar question to Councillor Lamb in a different way. Given that as the years go by, more and more people towards the 100% are going to be digitally included, obviously, as people age and so forth. Is there a point, particularly given the exigencies on the taxpayer, when you say, well, you know, we're never going to get it above 97%, it's impossible, so that's it?
So I started working for the council in 1997 in a role not too dissimilar to this, delivering digital inclusion. I was based in the library service at that point, delivering digital skills sessions for people who were coming into libraries and wanting to use their computers. And colleagues at the time said, well, you're not going to be in that job very long, are you? Because you're only really doing those sessions for older people and they're going to die off and then everybody else is going to know how to use it. And here we are 25 years later, and the need is as great as it ever was. I absolutely take your point that one of the indicators, you're absolutely right, one of the indicators for people being more likely to be digitally excluded is age, because of conditions that come with age and memory loss and dementia and mobility and so on and so forth. But it's not the only one. And even the fact that we've had the internet for whatever it is, 25 years now, there are people who have never used it and do not know how to. In the same way that we've had books and the printed word for 500 years, and adult literacy is still a challenge. I don't think it's going to go away, digital exclusion as an issue, unless all of those other things that I talked about earlier are also fixed. If someone somewhere is going to fix poverty and ensure that you know, everyone leaves school with the educational attainment that everyone would like, and all of the other factors that lead to digital exclusion, if all of those are fixed, maybe we won't be needed anymore. But I don't see that happening anytime soon.
So can I have a final question from Matthew, please?
Only one question, Chair. It could be a long question. So some observations perhaps, and then that will lead to a question here. So I think you mentioned there actually, you know, age being a factor that we have to accept. I think there will be some people who just don't want to do this. There is a personal choice element to this too, where some people just have got no intention of doing it. And I think that's why your service does such a good job at trying to work with partner organisations to look at where you have those willing participants. And I was listening to Clive Selley, who was the Clive Selley was the CEO of OpenReach at the weekend, saying, actually, to your point on digital inclusion, you know, their rollout service is slowing because of house building numbers. But actually, with socioeconomic factors, more people are using 3G, 4G, 5G, and those downloads on their phone to access services than ever before. We're often in a place where, as a council, we set up things so people can access it through a laptop as opposed to accessing it through a phone, where many of them will choose to do that. Which leads me to the sort of question, part A and part B to this, Chair. The first is that I think, is the service working with DWP? Because DWP and other departments of the council sit on whole hosts of data that allow us to tackle and target social tariffs in the areas that it needs to be tackled. I can't expect, and you would expect me to say that with my other hat on, that every telco company is going to give you confidential data. They're not going to do that, but I do agree we should be moving to an uptake model. But is DWP and other parts of government more generally, not just the council, doing enough on that? The second then is, we, Chair, have spoken with, and there's a consultation that's live at the moment about a doctor's surgery that looks like it's going to be closing in the Harewood ward in Harewood Village, as part of the takeover that's going through, and that merger of services. How can your service work with a community like that, where they maybe don't see themselves as affinity to WISE or other bodies? How can we work with them so that people who may find themselves needing to use online services to get prescriptions, to book doctor's appointments, to make sure that they've not got, in terms of the switchover that's there, to make sure that they're ready, how can we do that to target those people and really help them? Because I appreciate, as Councillor Lamb said, we're not a statutory body in the same way that those others are listed, but I think we've probably got a good input to help you as well.
I do want to revisit the first point, because I don't think I addressed it in terms of the people not wanting to do it. I think that's absolutely fine. From our perspective, absolutely fine, as long as that is their informed choice. I can read. If I choose not to read books for my leisure, that's on me. I'll watch TV, I'll do whatever I want to do. That's an informed choice. It's not forced upon me because I can't read. And it's the same ethos. Once all of the barriers have been removed, people have been shown, they've had a go, if they still go, do you know what? I'd rather just go and do a thing face to face. That's absolutely fine and dandy. What that leaves them with is the opportunity to come back to it at a point at which they might want to. So if the snow is on the ground and the nights are drawing in and I'm not that steady on my feet, do you know what? I might just do it digitally today. But then I'm back to face when I want. So absolutely, it should never be a forced choice, but equally in both directions. People should not be forced to do things digitally, but also the option to do it digitally or not should not be forced upon them by their life circumstance. I want to do it digitally, but I can't. That's not equal opportunity to access as far as we're concerned. We have experience, I'm certain it was in LS25, of a GP surgery closing, and we worked really closely with them in terms of, as you rightly suggest, some of the online tools and support that people can use to book repeat prescriptions without having to visit, but also in terms of what the new surgery was able to offer and the support from the old one before it closed, and that support being there. And very happy to have that conversation if you've got a surgery in mind that we can speak to. We have a well-established digital health hub program. We have connections across primary care. I was at the primary care board last week where they were talking about moves within particular primary care networks and so on and so forth. Very happy to have that conversation and would love to do a targeted piece of work there. And in terms of DWP, we only have a contact at the regional level. So something I didn't mention in the report, because obviously I was focusing on the area. Leeds is about to lead a piece of digital inclusion West Yorkshire, essentially, where we are taking our model and working with colleagues who are leading digital inclusion in Bradford, Calderdale, Kirklees and Wakefield to apply the Leeds digital inclusion model across West Yorkshire. And we have had conversations with DWP about what the support might look like at a regional level. So I've absolutely got contact, but I've only spoken to her in relation to the West Yorkshire work. Actually, there's no reason that I can't speak to her and say, is there some data that you can share in terms of local people that might be more eligible for social tariffs and whether we can do a targeted piece of work to increase take up there? Yeah.
Chair, are you happy that we take that up through you? And I think if we can, anything we can do to back Jason on DWP getting more involved, there's huge rafts of data that government has that can really help do this work. Unfortunately, it's just stored really badly in silo effect, and we need to crack that open.
Well, thank you, Jason. That was very enlightening. And I think we're kind of lost. We're all at different levels of our digital usage. I'm a Luddite, but there we go. Right, so thank you very much for all the questions that you've answered. And now we'll move on to the Gypsy Traveller Service. And I'm sorry that you've had to wait so long, Gary.
It's not a problem. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, hello everybody. Yeah, I'll just have provided the report on a little bit on the sort of background of our service and the work that we do with the roadside encampments also. So we're quite a small team. I'm the service manager for the Traveller Service. So part of our role is to manage the statutory sites, so the social housing within Leeds, so the settled sites. We also manage the unauthorised encampments across the city, and we also liaise and try to build links with the community as well. So this year we've seen a big increase really in terms of encampments, and I can talk a little bit about that, as to why that is. Certainly, historically, the south of the city has seen the majority of encampments, and the east really. And recently we've seen more encampments happening across the sort of north of the city. So within Roundhay, Crossgates, and then into Wetherby and the Elaw, really, we've seen, the new link road, as popular as it is. It's been popular with encampments also. We do have a policy where we look to negotiate with travellers where we can on pieces of land, or if we have available land, we look to move them on in a managed way. So we work with asset management team to look at any land that they might have and whether it's suitable to just move groups onto. So we work to do that where we can. The challenge there is that with the financial situation, we are looking to sell off a lot of land. So we're struggling to find those pieces of land. Process wise, we follow the government guidance. We're bound by law. So we visit encampments very quickly. We carry out our welfare assessments. I think you've probably seen communications from myself as to, updates from me as to where we're at with certain encampments. So we visit, we make a decision as to whether we can either negotiate on the land or do we have to go to evict. And there are two routes really available to us. So there's either the court process, or we can look at Section 61, which is a police power under the Criminal Justice and Public Order Act. So we can look at those. We do provide, where we can, we provide facilities to limit the environmental impact, so portable toilets, household waste removal. We work closely with colleagues in the police, LASBAT, and the communities, the localities teams as well as other organisations who advocate for travellers. I've just provided some stats there just to show really the increase that we've seen in the outer north east area. So it's increased threefold really in the last year. And I think digging deeper into those figures, Wetherby has been hit quite a lot with the leisure centre, the wilderness car park. You're probably all aware of that. My colleague James Gray has been working on well, I've been linking in with James in terms of the e-law and what we can do to secure the road, because it has become so popular with smaller groups pitching up on the near the cycleway and other pieces of land where they've managed to gain access. So whenever we've found a weakness, I've walked not the length of it, but a fair way, looking at areas to say, right, where can we strengthen it? You know, what do we need to do here? We have, in terms of groups entering the city and in specifically coming into the outer northeast area, they tend to be groups that are passing through. So we see that traffic going through to Appleby, sort of from May, July, August time. It's very, very busy for us. So the parks are busy, smaller groups setting up on the e-law because of the proximity to the A1. I think we do try to look at negotiated stopping. I've put a little section in there. Obviously, that's something to look at sort of outside the meeting if anybody wants to discuss that with me. And then what we can do either to secure pieces of land moving forward, or look at any negotiated land that we could work together on to help alleviate some of the issues we're having in some of the more encamped on areas. So yeah, that's me. Thank you, Chair.
Questions? Councillor Staples.
Just following up from what you just said, actually, I know that you've been looking at trying to get another permanent site to alleviate the problems. And it's obviously difficult, as you just said, in terms of the council having to sell off land because of the difficult financial position. Is an option to negotiate with landowners to not to buy the land, but actually kind of rent the land from them?
Well, yeah, that's a good point, because we've had meetings recently. I've had a meeting today with planning to look at, can we adopt that strategy? It was one thing that was mentioned. You know, can we go to private landowners and say, can we lease the land, and can we use that land for a period of time? So certainly something we're looking to bring forward. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for bringing this item and also attending today, Gareth, and providing the report, as I was one of the forces behind asking for this to be on the agenda. As I've mentioned to you before, I am concerned about the figure recording because, for example, when I asked a question at the recent council meeting, it was recorded that since this financial year began, that no traveller encampments have taken place in the Harewood ward. And that's factually incorrect. For example, all of the camps that have taken place in the Winmore Country Park and on the A64 roundabout, which is at least 5, if not to include others, have actually been within the ward. So as a result of that, since the beginning of this year, there have been, obviously I appreciate there's the border between the outer east and the outer northeast, but taking that tributary through the middle, the e-law, there have been 20 encampments in and around the area, 1 attempted break-in which were disturbed by the police, and 19 successful encampments. And my concern is the fact that we need to make sure that's absolutely recorded. And I appreciate before the meeting you discuss it with me and we arranging for that to be corrected, because if those figures are included in the 81 camps that we've had this year across the city, that equals to 23 or 24% just in one area. And that's regardless of not including Wetherby. And as someone who's been involved in the e-law preparations for a long, long time, raised repetitively the idea that this would actually happen. And it began in January, mid-January this year, with the first encampment on Thorner Lane in our ward, followed very quickly by a second one, and the floodgates then opened. My concern is that with the flurry of so many camps, I am seriously concerned that the discussion is around trying to find and alleviate the problem by finding land in our area to effectively say, well, because they're illegally breaking into sites in our area and committing a criminal offence, it is now in legislation, we are then effectively aiding and abetting that by then providing the facilities to do that. And so my question is, a big question that a lot of my residents ask, we've got permanent sites at Cottingley and also elsewhere at Hunslet. Can you tell me what sort of usage are they getting? And are the groups that are largely that you're engaging with that are coming to our area, are they using those sites otherwise? Because it does mention the report that there are multiple groups, but they seem to be the same groups at the same time. But I appreciate there is a transitionary part to it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Firth. Yeah, I will go back and have a look at those figures in terms of the e-law and the boundaries, because obviously we feed it into the map and look at it from that aspect. So apologies, we'll have another look at those figures, and I can get back to you on that. In terms of the settled sites, we're at capacity. We have 41 families living on Cottingley Springs permanently, and we have another 8 at Kidacre Park. We are looking at other permanent sites. Speaking to colleagues also, we're looking at pieces of land that we could use for permanent sites. We've got some land identified in the site allocations plan. So we are looking to set up the programme board again in the new year to look at both permanent site provision and negotiated stopping. So there are some ideas as to how we can improve negotiated stopping with the lack of land that we have, but we're unable to move the roadside unauthorised encampments onto Cottingley Springs or Kidacre because there simply isn't any room for them. We would need either identified sites for them or transit sites, which other local authorities have used.
Thank you for that, Gareth, and thank you for being honest with us. Can I ask, how long have they been at capacity? The reason I asked that question because of the fact that I appreciate it's a very long process, and I also understand that it's very difficult. We wouldn't want given the criminal activity that's taken place with the encampments taken place, it would be a lot of my residents would be finding it very difficult to then contemplate then abetting that in the area. But I want to make sure that ultimately we know where we stand and how long has that taken place, so that we can understand how long we've been actually allowing, therefore, the further encampments to carry on.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the sites have been in existence for, well, since the early 70s. I've been working in the service for 20 years. And there's always been a waiting list, a housing list of 20 to 30 families waiting to go onto the plot. So as soon as we get we probably have about 1 or 2 vacancies a year. Some years we don't have any. And when people leave, we fill that straight away. Sometimes it's with roadside families. So we operate a similar allocations policy or lettings policy to housing. So we look at priority, need, priority award, length of times they've been waiting, that sort of thing. So Kidacre Park, we opened that site in 2018, so that's fairly recent, but there is a push to look at the strategy again up to 2040 with colleagues in planning to do a needs assessment and look at what do we need to provide, and that will include roadside families, families are expanding on Cottingley Springs, etc.
Thank you for that, Karen. I think the major dilemma that we've had is the fact that in the numerous counts that have taken place, we had one situation where a small family treated the area perfectly and really looked after the area on Cole Road. The problem was that when that same family arrived 2 weeks later, because they'd left before the notice had been issued, we had the situation whereby, unfortunately, I believe that it was the same group, left it in an absolute tip. And as a result, we've had a situation whereby thousands of pounds, according to my recent question, £24,000 has been spent since the beginning of this year just in Crossgates and Winmore and Harewood Ward. And obviously, I'm going to be inquiring further to inquire if it's more than that, given the fact that the figures are not correct, as we've discussed potentially. I just wanted to ask really in terms of making sure what mitigations are we putting in place, one, to ensure that we are serving notices before they depart the camp. I appreciate it's difficult because as soon as they may get wind, they may then leave. And the second point is in terms of actually what analysis we're making about what we could save by simply listening to maybe a little bit of some questioning that happened earlier when it came to actually installing bollards or boulders or otherwise, that if we put them in way in advance at areas that we potentially may deem to be vulnerable, then we may have prevented this in the first place.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I suppose to answer the point of target hardening is something we've looked at over the years on a lot of sites. You know, I'm not going to beat around the bush. The travellers have equipment. They have the ability to. I've seen all sorts of strong-looking fences, boulders, concreted in boulders, just moved, trees moved to gain access. We do work closely with colleagues in the serious environmental crimes team. They are looking to get they've got funding for some cameras to look at some more covert, because it's all about evidence. If we haven't got that, we're not going to get any prosecutions on, you know, it's very circumstantial. We could say, yes, you know, it is the group, but we have no evidence to back that up to secure a prosecution. I've been on a couple of sites myself where I've seen things and pointed it out to the police, and we have, you know, they've dialed something in and we've got some action. So it's about visiting the sites proactively and being kind of on it really in terms of our visits.
Thank you, Gareth. I have a question from Councillor Lamb, then Matthew Robinson, and then Neil Buckley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. There's no doubt in our ward, which is Wetherby, things have got worse, and it's an issue we've been chasing around for a number of years, putting measures in place in response to each encampment that's moved on. And I can go around the ward, tree planting on the A58, things we've done at Sandringham Park, barriers at the Ings, you could go on and on and on. The difficulty in our area in particular is when we do get encampments, the level of disruption is disproportionate to, I would argue, to a lot of the places where there's an issue. When they made their way to the Ings, that's hundreds of young people that can't take part in their sporting activities, in one case for a fortnight at a time, when they couldn't get onto the Ings because of the measure we put in place, and they took over the Cluster Nuts car park the day before the monthly farmers market, preventing access to for visitors to the town to do things. And so we are at the point where we have to do something and be more proactive, I think. And ultimately, if there isn't somewhere else to go, whether you like it or not, whatever your viewpoint is on travellers, if there isn't an alternative, well, then they're going to go somewhere. So we have to be proactive. My question is, one, what sort of conversations are you able to have, and do you have cross-border? So, for example, in our community, we've got an encampment at Spring Lane, which just falls into North Yorkshire, which has been there for years and years, doesn't cause anybody an issue. I know quite a few of the families on there, really nice people, well integrated to the community. Other suggestions, I might get shot down for suggesting anything in our locality, but the racecourse might be worth a conversation as somewhere that could be tolerated. And I just wonder what kind of conversations do we have? And coming back to the point about negotiating with landowners, is ultimately, if there isn't an alternative, they're going to go to places we really, really don't want them to go.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, I'll try my best to answer the cross-border question has been raised recently. Is can we work with North Yorkshire? Can we work with Wakefield, Bradford? They don't see the level of encampments that we see in Leeds by a long way. Slightly more rural, which is one of the reasons. It's a conversation I can take to I have meetings with other local authorities and people at a similar level to myself where we talk about issues, and it's something I can certainly raise with them. We don't have in Leeds we have a negotiated stopping policy. In North Yorkshire and the surrounding authorities, they haven't adopted a negotiated stopping policy. It's not to say that they wouldn't support it. I get a lot of inquiries from a lot of local authorities across the country saying it's something we'd like to adopt. So it's when it works, it's great. But you're absolutely right. If we can look at something where we can work in partnership, Selby is a good point, because there's a site that often moves across border there and into Leeds. We see that a lot. So can certainly and can certainly look at the race course if you think that's, and I'm happy if you think there's a piece of land that might be suitable. I'm happy to go with myself, members of Leeds Gate, just to look at it and see if it would work.
I'm sure I'll get shot by some people in our community for even suggesting something. However, you have to deal with the world as it is, not as you'd like it to be. And given the options or the alternatives, the race course, obviously with the exception of when there's a race day and things like that, but it is underused a lot of the time, and they need other means to generate income from time to time. So I would say it's worth having a conversation. Yeah, I might get shot for it, but at least it's doing something rather than wishing the problem away.
Happy to have that conversation. Yeah.
Councillor Robinson, and then Councillor Buckley, and then finally it'll be Councillor Stables.
I won't shoot Councillor Lamb, but I'll certainly ask questions. That's about what's going on there. 3 questions, if that's okay, Gareth. The first is, can you tell me the number of permanent sites that are in the other West Yorkshire authorities and other parts of North Yorkshire? You might not have them to hand now, but please, if we can be shared afterwards, that would be appreciated. And any information you do have in answering that would be welcome. The second is, are sites being discussed with private landlords in and around outer northeast area at the moment, as you alluded to in the first answer to Councillor Stables there? The third question then is, I'm keen to understand the direction of the service. Is it a facilitation service or an enforcement service? Because I wonder if you, and I'm sure you do, because you've worked in the service a lot, if you understand the impression that it sets to council taxpayers when somebody breaks the law and we then decide we're going to take them a Portaloo and some skips. I get it why you do that, because the cost to the council taxpayer in the longer term may be greater than land used on site. Nobody wants to be going and clearing up human excrement. But I've seen what's been left at certain sites in and around our ward before, and the impression that that gives to council taxpayers who are paying their money in good faith that somebody can come and abuse sites. And I hasten to add that that is not every traveller that's there. We've heard some cases already tonight, but there is a good number that go and abuse sites, and we seem to facilitate how that's perceived for many, many council taxpayers.
Thank you, Councillor. I can talk about permanent sites. Wakefield have got a permanent site, 38 plots. Bradford has got two sites. Can't remember off the top of my head, but I can get back to you with the figures. We certainly have lots. We've got one of the biggest sites in the country with 41 plots, and it's full. Private landlords discussions haven't happened yet. It's just very early days. It's something where we're thinking, could it happen? Is it something we can explore with the lack of land that we own? In terms of the service, we have an enforcement role. We don't turn up for the evictions, but because we have we conduct the welfare assessments. So we have to maintain some communication with people on the roadside. Some groups we get won't engage. They leave a lot of mess. They cause problems. It's then getting other partners involved. So environmental crime team, the police, antisocial behaviour team, all those incidents, and encourage your constituents to contact all of those services. Because what I find is we have a lot of calls through to our service saying this is a problem, or have conversations with yourselves. And then I'll talk to the police and say, what have you got on your log? And they'll say, well, we haven't got anything reported. And I think people don't want to go through the hassle of, reporting something, which takes time. So that's where we fall down a little bit, I feel. And people willing to give evidence. If they've seen someone fly tip, got a registration number, we can take action if we've got that. But I've had a few instances where people aren't willing to go to those lengths, and the camp moves on and it's gone and it's forgotten, and it's dealt with. But we're left with the cleanup cost. We're left with, we supply toilets, because if we didn't, and we've been through that period before, and you can understand there's an environmental issue with that. Burn them out, tip them over. We've had that.
And I get that there's that challenge and issue, but I think the question that was there, when you can understand, or can you understand how that is perceived by council taxpayers, where they say, get it, but it looks like, or is facilitating some of these sites where somebody's doing something that is enshrined in law that is illegal. And they will be the council taxpayer out there goes, move them on. What are you going to sit down for? If I broke the law, you'd be doing that. What the hell are you not doing that in this instance for?
Yeah, I mean, when we make that decision, if we're evicting through the court process, it can take up to 2 weeks. So in that process, while our process is quite quick, we go out usually the same day. My team provide me with the information. I'll make the decision, or we make the decision. We'll go to court. It's getting all the deeds and everything ready. Go to court, apply for a court date. We get the court hearing. We get the order. Next day, it's eviction. And that all takes, within that time scale, you've got a group on a piece of land that we didn't invite them on there. They're trespassing, and we move them on. Unless the police use their Section 61 powers. If they do that, they can be off the same day.
Sir Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and restrain myself. Paragraph 3 on page 21. And to discuss if their ward has any suitable locations that could potentially be used as stopping sites. If I volunteered any places in Old Woodley, I'd never be re-elected again. And we've tried our best in Old Woodley to put barriers round, 1 foot high, cast iron railings, which have worked, trees, and this year we haven't had any. But we had an invasion of our much-loved village green about 5 years ago, and it's well looked after. There's a lovely children's playground, commemorative oak trees, and all sorts. And the grass is cut nicely. And they came on there showing complete and total contempt and disregard for the population. We used Section 61 and we got them off. But one of the men on there said to me, when I was talking to a resident, he said, "Can I have some water?" And I said, "No, you can't." Whereupon I was met with an obscene anti-British tirade. So I don't know why, beyond the legal obligation, we do what we do. I just cannot understand it. Now, moving on, you say at paragraph 14, page 23. Unfortunately, criminals who are equipped with industrial equipment have vandalised some of these items. You presumably mean the gypsies. They're the criminals, aren't they? There's no other person who will do this. And then why are cleanups found to be necessary, given that all these travellers, in my experience, have large, comfortable caravans or mobile homes? Why did we face a situation at the park and ride on King Lane where every single planter was covered in human feces? And we don't want it again.
Thank you, councillor. I think I suppose when we look at groups across the city, there are groups that will move onto a piece of land, engage and look after it with us, and there are groups that don't and will cause issue. Where they cause issue, we need evidence. We need evidence to be able to prosecute them, and that's what we'd encourage people to come forward with. Certainly, I think I may have met you on the village green. I remember going there, and I remember that site, and it hadn't had travellers on there before, and a lot of the land around there, sort of Stonegate Road as well, has been secured. We've not had travellers back on there. It's kind of low level. It was popular for a while, and then it stopped. It's about the groups, I think, different groups. Are they engaging with us? Are they not? And if they're not engaging with us, then we don't really want them on that piece of land any longer, you know, if they're causing issue. But we are bound by the law. We have to adhere to the court process. If there are issues being reported and certainly being reported to the police, then the police gather that intel, they look at it regularly, and the inspector will make the decision. So it goes through the inspector, and I will have conversations with our police liaison officer as well. So it's monitored quite closely, but needs to be reported by residents if they do see anything.
Thank you. I was going to make the point that Councillor Lamb's made about cross-boundary, actually, because obviously around the Wetherby ward, we're right next to North Yorkshire, and I'm very aware of that site there. So I guess the question is, do we know, or can we find out what the occupancy rate is of the surrounding sites? Because there are travellers the people that choose to travel are going to continue to travel. They've chosen that as a life, you know, a way of living, as we choose to live in houses. And they are often en route somewhere, as you said, to Appleby Fair. So we know they go there every year. We probably know, I guess, how many are travelling up to Appleby Fair every year. So and it's happened for forever, hasn't it? It's happened for generations. So we know these people are going to travel through, and therefore they're going to want to stop off. And we are adjacent to the A1, therefore it's going to be within our area. So it seems crazy to me that that this has been happening for so long, and yet we haven't got the facility to actually accommodate them in sites where we would like them to be, where we've agreed that this is a suitable site and we've got all the provision for them. And you know, we go around, it seems to me, in circles talking about we don't want them here and we don't want them there, and it's because there isn't a site for them to go to. And if there isn't anywhere to go to, they're always going to go somewhere we don't want them to go. So and treat the site badly. I completely agree, because that's a good point, because if they don't believe that society is providing them with somewhere for them to stay, given that that this happens every year, then they're going to feel anti-society and want to do the things that we don't want them to do. So I find it very, very frustrating. Do you find it so frustrating? And you know, is there something likely to happen? I guess is the question as well.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. So we are looking at the program board again, setting that up in the new year. We're having discussions about negotiated stopping and what form that would take. Would we be looking at a sort of semi-permanent site? Some local authorities look at that. So they create a site, they provide electric, water on a site, it's a tarmacked area. And people are allowed to stay in a managed way and then they move on. Or do we look at parcels of land where we've gotten through that they're up for disposal or sale, and then we look at, can we move them onto that piece of land temporarily up to 28 days? We don't need planning permission. They can't reuse that piece of land. Once they've used it, we won't allow groups back on there, so it doesn't have that sort of effect where people keep coming back. So it is something we're looking at. Yes, I've seen it for years. I've seen lots of encampments. I see 100 a year at least, and it's increasing. We target hardened areas. They'll find other areas to go. So that's the game we play, and it doesn't stop. Travellers will travel, and they'll travel during the season, which is the spring to autumn. It slows down a little bit now, but yeah.
Sorry, just very briefly to say that, but you must have all the data. Do you have the data on how many people are travelling, and therefore how many in our area need the facility to stay? Because if not you personally, if we do as a council have that data, why haven't we found a solution after all these years?
It's a massive question. I'm not sure I'm the person to answer that. I do have all the data. We've kept a database for 20 years, and it's number of encampments. How long did they stay? What method did we use to remove them? Did they engage? Do we consider them to be Leeds based or a family that's moving through? So we've got lots of data and logs, and we've done mapping exercises. Certain areas become popular for a couple of years, and then they're target hardened, and then move on to other areas. But certainly along that sort of corridor where you've got the motorway where people are travelling up, we do see encampments, and hence, Wetherby tends to see a few encampments, smaller caravans normally, smaller number of caravans.
Councillor Buckley and Councillor Firth, last two questions, brief, please.
Just a quick comment, Chair. Councillor Stables mentioned whether society would take note of this. And I would just say that these people, in my experience, are from the Republic of Ireland. And the ones I've met have all got homes in the Republic of Ireland. The Republic of Ireland is a foreign country, and therefore, if any society is going to be looking after them, it certainly shouldn't be ours.
Well, I would take issue with one thing, which is the fact that I do feel that the nature of the behaviour and by illegal behaviour by criminals, because not all travellers are the same, let me say that to say the least, has unfortunately outweighed the good behaviour. And I have a serious concern that when businesses, in particularly around the new East Leeds Orbital Road, feel threatened as a result of the behaviour of some of those individuals, and that at the same time that the police are not willing to use the powers at their disposal to deal or tackle with the issue readily and ably, maybe because of the fact that ultimately there have been other issues with confrontations, particularly this year on the East Leeds Orbital Road with some of the illegal camps and some of the individuals involved. I just wanted to ask, you mentioned earlier, Gareth, and I appreciate this is a wider discussion, but there was one common denominator that you mentioned about why Leeds potentially suffers more. 2 years ago, we were spending 170,000, 190,000 the year after 21-22. In the report, it says now we're spending between 230 and 250,000 a year. is negotiated stopping effectively leaving Leeds vulnerable to more illegal activity and criminal illegal traveller camps?
Thank you, councillor. Certainly within the last 2 years, we haven't been able to find any land for negotiated stopping. There are cost benefits to having negotiated stopping land, which means we're not evicting as often. We haven't got the court costs. We haven't got the cleanup costs. We have a better relationship with the people that we want to negotiate with. So it's certainly, yeah, it's a wider question. You know, it's about, again, goes back to evidence, groups that we don't want, what's being done to tackle their behaviours by the police, antisocial behaviour teams. Are they known to us? Are there groups that just come through the city, cause trouble on various sites and leave and move on?
Thank you, Gareth. Well, thank you very much. I did say to you that there would be a lot of questions and a lot of comments. I did warn you. So it's certainly not an easy topic for discussion. And having dealt with some of the individuals who have ended up incarcerated in my previous existence, I understand that there are cultural differences which most people don't understand, which would probably answer Councillor Buckley's question about why they don't utilise the caravans and mobile homes in the ways that we would normally assume that they would. So there are some cultural differences, which is probably about lack of education. And I think there is that fear factor as well, that if people understood some of the culture, they might find that we're not that, in a lot of ways, we're not that much different. But thank you very much for coming. And there will be some follow-ups with Toby. Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So item number 11 is the finance report, and it says for Carl Lane to present the item. I should have read them if there. What's happened?
Oh. Minor. Sorry about that.
Okay. So if there are any questions about the finance report, please. Nobody's got their hand up. So is there anything that you particularly want to point out, Elaine or Carl?
Just really briefly from me, Chair. Hopefully I'll be able to get through this without coughing and spluttering because I'm full of cold at the moment. I'll just really quickly talk the committee through their available wellbeing budget figures. So the overall wellbeing budget figure is £41,621.79. And that's as follows for the wards. So Alwoodley, £12,211.26. Harewood, we've got £12,230.65. And finally, whether we've got £17,179.88. And then we've just got a couple of wellbeing projects for consideration by the committee chair. Just to explain to the committee that we have had the appropriate conversations with the appropriate ward members. So the first one is Deepdale Centre utility costs. The total project cost is 7,000. We're proposing 7,000 from the wellbeing budget. And the suggestion is that that's taken from the Wetherby and District Development Fund.
Yep. Councillor's tables. If you just nod your head, that would be helpful. Just nod your head, that would be helpful. Thank you.
And then the second wellbeing project is the land purchase at East Keswick. So that's East Keswick Village Hall. Total project cost is £85,000. And the amount proposed from wellbeing is 6,500. And the suggestion is that that comes from the Harewood Environmental Fund.
Oh. Thanks, Carl. Is there a mice contribution that we need to make alongside it as well, Elaine? From memory, there is. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Thanks, councillors. And then delegated decisions. We've just got the one delegated decision since the last committee meeting on the 18th of September. And that's for additional litter bins in Wetherby. So the overall amount for that is £2,750, which is reflected in the finance report. And there's been no decline project since the last committee on the 18th of September. And then if I can move the committee onto the Youth Activity Fund. So table 2 gives the available balances. The total allocation remaining is £14,611.40. Alwoodley has got £7,887.80. Harewood £8,028.63. And finally, we've got Wetherby with £427.97. And there's just one youth activity fund project for consideration by the committee. And that's for the remaining balance for the Wetherby ward, for the Wetherby Youth Project. And as I said earlier, the conversation has taken place with all 3 elected members about this project being approved. Okay, so if I can move the committee on to the capital budget finally. The overall available budget is £33,895.01. Alwoodley has got £12,953.68. Harewood has got £11,487.66. And finally, Wetherby, we've got £9,453.67. And that concludes the finance report, Chair.
Thank you, Carl. Is there anything that you want to say, Elaine? No. Okay, thank you. So the final agenda, or the agenda item number 12, is the update report. Are there any questions that people have of the update report? No. The council land's looking and shaking his head. Okay. Elaine, is there anything that you want to point out particularly? Councillor Cohen, sorry.
I've actually been contacted, it's very bizarre. I've actually been contacted by a Wetherby resident. This relates to campaigns. A Wetherby resident has contacted me. He was clearly watching us live. So he said, how's this, mate? Yes, I was watching and asked me to thank Councillor Lamb for his parking campaign for trying to prevent the administration pushing ahead with introducing parking charges. So he's asked me to publicly thank Councillor Lamb for taking the lead on that. So well done, Councillor Lamb.
Elaine, was there anything you wanted to point out?
Nothing from me, Chair.
Thank you. Right. Yeah, so we've had the police priorities. There is the issue of that you want to bring up about community committees.
Okay, so I think Councillor Cohen's point links very nicely into the last conversation that the chair wants to introduce. With agreement with the chair, we said we were going to have a brief conversation about engagement with the public via the committees. I think this is at the request of Councillor Stables. So Councillor Harrington, I'll let you introduce this. And then we've got some stats and figures to go through.
Okay. Right, so the situation was that we have had previous discussions in this committee about how we engage with our local communities. We have previously moved the community committee around to various local village halls and other buildings. Unfortunately, we're not able to live stream those meetings. Usually, we're extremely lucky if we get 2 people at them from members of the public. When we've been, I think Toby has some figures that he's done looking at engagement. Oh, Carl's got them now, for engagement via the internet. So some people will watch live, some people will watch afterwards, which actually facilitates people who are working this evening who wouldn't be able to interact with us while we're live, that they can actually look at it afterwards. So the discussions that we'd had previously were that we would continue to meet here on that basis, and then we would have some further information about that. Bearing in mind that the community committee review is ongoing, and the next workshop that is scheduled, which I would encourage all ward members to attend, is about how we engage with our local communities. And that, I think, is the place where there will be a far greater discussion about this. But Carl will share the figures just for information.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so just linking into to what Councillor Harrington has actually said. I suppose the first thing to say is we're not talking about huge amounts of engagement through that webcasting, although when you compare the views in relation to the number of people that turn up to the committee meetings, it is substantially more. So for the last committee meeting that took place on the 18th of September, we're talking about 68 views, so just under 70 people watched that particular webcast. For the one before that, so we're looking at July of this year, 72 people viewed that webcast. 13th of March of this year, I can't remember what the items were, what the themes and topics were, but that was far more palatable to members of the public that were watching. We had 142 views for that one. The 12th of December of last year, so we're looking back full 12 months, 107 views. And then the one previous to that, we had 8, previous to that, we had 6, and the one previous to that, we had 3. So we're not talking about huge numbers, but certainly in terms of viewing the webcast, we are actually talking about substantially more people than turn up to the committee meetings themselves. I was one of them, councillor.
Okay, so okay, Councillor Stables, you wanted to ask?
Thank you. So in terms of the numbers, firstly, as we've all just realised, that is really odd how we went 368, 107. So I'd like to understand why that happened. So it would be really useful to have a look at what was discussed at that particular occasion. Why has it suddenly gone up this year? It seems really, really strange. Also, just an understanding, and I know I kind of touched on this before, and I don't know whether we can find this out. Firstly, if it says 68, that you, as you said, 68 views, how many people is it? Because it could be some people logging back in and out. You know, they have a little bit of time, they look at something, and then something comes up. Oh, I'll have another look at that. So we don't know how many actual people are logging into that over what period of time. And the third point, which I was briefly discussed previously, was that officers are sometimes recommended to watch if it's a particular topic in their area. So, and I know I asked Toby this, and I don't think you can find it because it may be the majority of these people are actually officers and they're watching because of a particular report. And it might go back to your 3, 6 and 8, you know, if you take the officers out, in which case it becomes much more, it becomes not then as much difference between the number of people who might come along in person to these vast numbers that we're getting watching currently.
Councillor Cohen had his hand up first, and then Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair. Numbers don't lie, and I don't think there are significant numbers of officers desperately tuning in to watch reports, not least when they can read them. There may be some, but of course most officers certainly involved in the reports actually come to present the reports. I suspect one of the reasons numbers went up is, I know one or two of us last year sort of actually, you know, we should probably be promoting this on our social media, and a few people thought, oh, maybe we'll dip into parts that interest us. And of course, that's the plus with the stream, that you can dip in to what you want to watch and perhaps not have to sit through bits you don't want to watch. For me, having been lucky enough to be involved in these meetings for 12 years, invariably nobody was turning up at meetings. Occasionally, 1 or 2 people turned up at meetings. We live geographically in the largest community committee area in the city. And for me, it's hugely disenfranchising to individual wards to keep moving around. I really, for me, to say we are meeting in the Civic and it's accessible-ish. I mean, you can't get a bus here, but it's accessible of a form. You can log in. We just had a whole thing about digital inclusion. The more I think about this, absenting somebody telling us we should be doing it differently, I am simply not persuaded that there is logic in moving. And speaking for myself, I really do not want to be moving. any more around and about. We do not get to more people. I wish we did, but all the evidence says that we reach most people by allowing them to tune in.
Can I just also add that there are many other forums in the whole of the outer northeast of Leeds where we do have parish councils. We all have parish councils. So we attend parish council meetings. We have three parish council forums that we can hold each year, which we do. And we can actually have workshops about various things, which again is involving parish councils, and any member of the public can come to those as well. So I think that because of our parish system, we are quite well served by being able to actually access the people, and for residents to be able to access us. So, Sam, you had a comment.
Thank you very much, Norma. And I do know, speaking as we're in the midst of a digital champion with, obviously, Dan has his roadshow of regular online Facebook surgeries, and they are very successful. And you know that by simply watching one of them and knowing how many people, Dan and residents that Dan knows personally, who tune in regularly to find those updates. And let me also make clear that I am also not against moving around. The problem is that we can't move around as much as we would like. I would absolutely love to be able to use the Aerium, to be able to use other facilities, but the problem is the webcast. And I really do think if we can find any way to get around that, that would be perfect. But the biggest problem we have is the logistics of doing it, because we did do it, and then before the pandemic, and then as a result of that, that reincarnated the Dan Cohen Roadshow, but also more generally, unfortunately, we have to then ensure that everyone can see it online. And also, I think it's helpful to have a record of what we've actually said so that people can hold us to account, and see the discussion that we've been having about those topics, and actually go back and look at them when they think that maybe we've said something otherwise. So I do want to move around. The problem is the logistics of doing it, because there isn't the facilities to do it in our communities, unfortunately, and we'd have to go outside the outer northeast to have a readily available one every time.
Got Councillor Robinson and then Councillor Lamb. Okay.
So I've got a lot of sympathy with moving around. However, maybe I knew however was coming. We used to have a lot more community committees. So actually it was easy to move around. There were 6, used to do 3 in the Civic Hall in the winter, 3 in the summer, and the 3 would move around across each of the wards. We're just not in a place where we have that number at the moment. Similarly, it depends what this body is seeking to do. Some of the items are not that interesting for members of the public. I'm not going to lie. There's elements of just basic governance that need to be done in terms of some of the finance discussions. We're not discussing the ins and outs and merits of a financial item, because it's generally been already discussed elsewhere in another forum. So, and if somebody was then saying, bring your questions forward about something, well, actually a piece of casework or an individual ward issue would not necessarily be best represented through this forum either. So I think my challenge is, and I'm actually thinking about the virtual element, do we give people a chance to dial in, to at the beginning of something? I'm not sure we'll reach any more people there. I think there's an element of people watching it for certain items, as has been discussed before. And I look back, and March was gullies and highways. That's where people's interest peaked there. So we obviously need highways at every discussion, or a bush tucker trial for somebody to do at every meeting. I don't know, but you could do the next one. I'll do the next one. I don't. Gosh, not sure what I'd be put up for eating. But yeah, so I think it's about thinking how we share that as councillors so that more people watch this, how we make the items maybe more relevant for people so that they watch it. But I'm not sure going out across the whole of the area is going to do what we want it to do. But I have some sympathy with the argument of increasing engagement, definitely.
Councillor Lamb, then Councillor Stable.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As I think I'm the longest serving member of this committee. I started in an analog age, long before digital, and I tried to remember. I think my first community committee meeting was in East Keswick Village Hall, with the councillors Feldman in attendance. So it shows how far I make myself feel old now. The most, and in those days we did move around a lot more. I quite liked that, getting to see different parts, not just of, I know my own ward well, but it's interesting to go around other parts. I think the highest attendance I ever remember in 17 years, I think there was a particularly contentious issue at Treetops in Alwoodley, and I think 4 members of the public came to talk to us about it. And we tried many things to get more engagement. I think now we are in a digital age. The key thing is to make sure the meeting can be webcast. I'd be absolutely open to moving around, provided that technology is available. Until it is made available to us for this purpose, and I would say collectively we should lobby for that it should be available. I think you have to prioritise that far more people can access the meeting by a digital means than by us physically going round and cutting off that option for people. The one thing I would like us to look at is perhaps, is there a way we could make the forum accessible to people online as well? So it could be interactive, and at least people from the comfort of their own home could ask us a question by some means. That I think that would be a step forward. So that's I think digital is the priority. I'm quite open if we've got the technology to move around, but let's make it accessible to as many people as possible.
Councillor Stables.
Thank you. I appreciate all the points that have been made. When it was the EHC scrutiny meeting last week, when I'm pretty sure, and I put this question, I'm trying to think who it was to. Was it Paul Money?
It was Liz Jarman.
It was Liz Jarman. So I put the question about whether one of the things they were looking at was exactly that point of making, providing a facility to enable the community to move around, and made the point that, you know, we're so far away from the Civic Hall, no one's going to come here from the community. And they said it was something they were looking at doing, trying to provide that facility to enable us to live stream and also get out into the community. So hopefully that is certainly being looked at, and hopefully it'll be addressed soon. But I completely accept that point that we need to get that in place before we move around. The other point is coming back to the point was about the objectives, because we obviously I'm new to this, and so my question is, what actually is the objective of the community committee? Because unless we really understand that, then we don't know what we're actually trying to achieve here. So a lot of it it seems to be a real mixture of things. So, yes, we've got the sort of the nitty gritty financial stuff that we need to discuss, which isn't interesting necessarily to other people. But then there's reports like today, where lots of residents, I suggest, would be really interested in that discussion we've just had about both of those things, actually, digital inclusion and travellers. So I think we need to establish what the objective is, and also coming back to the point as well about relevant topics. So if we have relevant topics, then I think we will get people engaged and wanting to come along. And then my final point is that, again, at EHC scrutiny, when this was discussed, the point was made that there are a number of community committees around the city where they do get a lot of engagement and people coming regularly. And I also take the point that we are in a very geographically large area, and that is part of the issue as well. But I think all of those things need to be looked at in terms of discussion, which I'm sure we're going to have in January. Thank you.
Yeah, I think all of those points, Penny, are actually what the workshop is about and what the community committee review is about. The community committee, as far as I understand it, we follow a prescribed agenda because we have to for governance issues, and that's what we do. Now, obviously, the items that have come up tonight were items that were actually suggested by ward members. So we will do our best to facilitate those things if there's something that you want to actually bring forward, and we can do that. So workshops and things like that are things that we will discuss from time to time. So actually we would like to do a workshop on that, and then we will work to do that. So there's a prescribed agenda at the moment that says these are the things that we absolutely have to do for governance issues. So you can't really move too far away from that. The parish council forums are a different thing though, because that's a much freer environment where more discussion could take place. And certainly when we've been to Collingham and when we've been to even to Treetops and places like that, when we've had the parish council forum, then you do get more. You get parish councillors coming along and they will actually then enter into that discussion. So all of these points are things that need to go to that workshop about engagement. Yes, Councillor Robinson.
To add one thing to what you said here, and I'm mindful that we as members are discussing this and we represent an area. I'm also mindful, and though they don't get a voice in this, there are 3 officers in this room who have to come and attend and do this. When we start to move around, the officers also have to do this. And actually while many of them have always in the past, in my experience, quite happy to be flexible in what they do. This committee isn't 9 to 5. And we sometimes are asking things of officers. So I think being able to forward plan that is fine, but being able to forward plan that and say, by the way, can you travel miles out and you don't drive or something like that? That is a challenge for many of those officers.
Right, well, thank you very much for all the comments. I'd like to just say formally record our thanks to Andrew Birkbeck, who has been in the Community Committee Forum for quite a long time. I certainly met Andrew before I became a councillor at parish council forums in the area, and worked with him on the neighbourhood planning issues that we were having in, because we were looking at neighbourhood planning in Wetherby. So I'd just like to formally record this committee's thanks to Andrew for all the work that he's done. Thank you very much. And the date and time of the next meeting is Thursday, the 21st of March at 5:30 here. Wish you all a very Merry Christmas and look forward to seeing you in the new year.